Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar celebrating IJC's alumni leaders. We're going to give it 3 more minutes to let other attendees join, so sit tight. We will get started soon, and great to see everyone. Welcome again. All right, welcome everybody to this webinar celebrating IJC's alumni leaders. My name is Chris Zoya. I'm the communications manager at IJC, and I'd love to welcome all of you to this conversation with our alumni leaders. What better way to celebrate IJC's 9th anniversary than by chatting with seasoned immigration professionals who've been practicing in the field for quite a while. You'll be joined today by IJC's Executive Director, Jojo Annabelle, IJC Board Member, Judge Sarah Burr, and our Comms and Dev Associate, Lena DaCosta, and of course, our wonderful alumni panelists who you will all get to know very well shortly. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over for Judge Burr for opening remarks, and then you'll hear a wonderful panel conversation, and we'll make sure to save time at the end of the hour for questions from the audience as well. So welcome again. And with that, take it away, Judge Burr. Welcome again, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Sarah Burr, and I am a retired immigration judge and a board member of IJC. I've been a board member for almost as long as IJC's been in existence, and it has been a privilege and a pleasure to work with this organization and for this organization. I was inspired by Judge Robert Katzman to join with IJC a number of years ago. It was his passion, his persistence, and his humanity, which persuaded me that being on the board of IJC would be important. Of course, it was very important to me as a former immigration judge, having had a front row seat to some of the practice by attorneys that was less than stellar. But I don't want to deal with the negative. Let's go to the positive. It's 9 years, and it's amazing what has happened in those 9 years. When I started with IJC, we had one small office in the corner of Robin Hood. That was it. There were 3 employees an executive director, a director of training, and a third person whose title I don't remember. That was it. 3 desks in a small room, 3 employees, and IJC was off to the races. At that time, we only had programs in the 5 boroughs of New York. 9 years later, we operate in 15 states, including in Tijuana in Mexico, and have 44 legal service partners. It is an amazing growth of this organization, and I could not be prouder of the staff, the board members, and the fellows and the alumni of this organization. Today, as we celebrate our 9th anniversary, we do want to focus on our alumni and our future alumni who are our current fellows. Part of Judge Katzman's theory of establishing IJC was not just to have competent attorneys in immigration court, although that was certainly a very large part of it, but it was also to seed the immigration field with IJC graduates who would continue in related areas to bring more justice to immigrants and to expand immigrant rights. The 4 panelists who we have today are a perfect example of the different paths that our alumni can take in pursuing immigrant advocacy. We have Catherine Kim, who is the director of a very well-respected legal representation organization in New York City. We have Kenji Kizuka, who is the director of asylum policy at an international refugee organization. We have Allison Mandeville, who is representing immigrants in their appeals from their immigration court decisions or from whatever form of relief they are seeking. And finally, we have Nicole Medved, who is the founder and director of an immigrants' rights clinic at her law school alma mater. So I think that these 4 people, and believe me, we have many more alumni who are practicing and doing great work, but these 4 alumni are illustrative of the different fields that our alumni can go into after their fellowship. They also provide a window for the future of our fellows after they leave IJC, to see the many ways they can continue to expand the field of immigration rights. Based on the talent and the dedication of our alumni and our fellows, I believe that the next 9 years will be even more exciting and productive. Thank you very much. And on to our excellent Executive Director, Jojo Annabelle.
Thank you, Judge Barrett, for your kind introductions. We really appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone, and to our supporters, staff, fellows, and alumni, welcome. It's because of you that we exist, and it's because of you that we continue to do this work. Just as the late Judge Robert Katzman envisaged in 2012 when he spoke about a core of fellows. Today, as Judge Bear mentioned, 9 years later, we've trained more than 320 lawyers and advocates. Approximately 90% of our justice fellows are still working in the immigration field and working in about 12 states. If you look closely, of our inaugural class in 2014 of 25 Justice Fellows, 100% of them are working in the immigration field. That is what fellowships do. That is what IJC do. This afternoon, I am privileged to chat with 4 of our alumni about their careers and how they continue to strive for a just and humane immigration system and policies. To our audience, you would have an opportunity to ask questions of our panel. Please use the chat feature for that. Catherine, Kenji, Nicole, Ali, welcome home to IJC. It's great to have you back. Let's start this conversation by asking each of you to share what brought you to IJC. And we can start with Catherine because you were in our inaugural class back in 2014.
Sure. Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back and to share space with all of you. I guess I wanted to spend this moment to a little bit honor my grandmother who passed away last summer. She was sort of the matriarch of my family, and her experience of colonialism, war, and then migration to the United States and her life thereafter was something that has been part of my consciousness ever since I was a young child. And I think that personal connection made me interested in immigration and sort of the reasons why people and communities move. And that interest sort of grew during college and law school as I had the opportunity to learn more about the political and historical context for the US immigration law and policies and the way that racism, xenophobia, US imperialism, and economic inequality interact and intersect in this system. And so that was sort of what sparked my interest. But in terms of what got me to IJC, it's kind of maybe a funny story or not, but IJC came out during the winter of my 3L year. And by that time, I had gone through a very, very painful job search process, looking for a public interest job, had many, many job interviews and many, many rejection letters and emails. And honestly, when I saw the email announcing IJC, I nearly didn't apply because at that moment, I just had a lot of self-doubt and worried, how am I going to get these application materials together? How am I going to call yet again and ask for a reference letter? And really what helped me was a mentor and professor who proactively reached out and offered and said, if you're interested in this, I'm happy to provide a reference. And that gave me a little push to really feel like I could do it again. And I just share that because I think that still in the legal community, we don't talk about failure and disappointment and loss enough, and also just the importance of kindness from people who are in relative positions of power. So it's my brief story.
Kenji, do you want to go next? Sorry.
Yep. Sorry, Georgia, I didn't do that. And apologies, I'm having a plumbing/electricity emergency here, so I had to hop off for a second to go deal with that. So I was gonna just share that in terms of kind of professional journey, I came to IJC from a background in human rights. And so I was interested in thinking about and working on immigration as a human rights issue, which in the US is not necessarily how we approach, how we think about, rights in general and legal practice generally. And I was lucky enough to be placed at a host organization that had a focus on human rights in addition to representation of asylum seekers. And so I was able to, work for several years doing direct representation of clients exclusively through IJC, and then being able to, stay on for an additional year. But then also to kind of slowly start working into some of the policy and human rights work that I had done previously before law school. And so obviously at the time when I applied to be an IJC fellow, I didn't know that it would work out so well. And it was kind of, just serendipitous for me that was the placement that I had, or maybe not, maybe IJC saw what my background was and put me in that organization. I don't know. But I came into wanting to do immigration work to kind of bridge those areas of law, of human rights and immigration. And I've just been so lucky to be able to do that. And I think the other thing that I wanted to highlight and why I was interested in coming into immigration work through IJC was that that network that everyone's been mentioning, of all the other people who would be fellows, and the chance to learn from one another and to be in this really difficult field and endeavor together, and to know that there would be other people to call on, whether that's for a very specific question of law or procedure, or needing somebody to make an appearance for you, but also just the fellowship of having other people in a cohort with you who've gone through something kind of similar, and are learning at the same time that you are. And there's just so much value to being able to call on those friends and colleagues, and to just have that group of people to move forward with. And then, of course, also to have IJC as this organization that's continued to grow and expand across the country. It's just been, kind of spectacular to see in ways that I didn't imagine at the time. So that's been exciting, but that's all after the fact. I can't claim to have known that before.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again to everybody for being here. It's such a pleasure to be talking about IJC and why I came to IJC. And I think I'll take the question to be what brought me to IJC to begin with and what kept me with IJC for so long. So I came to IJC for the opportunity to learn from the very best. I knew that I wanted to be in immigration law for a very long time. And at the time that I was applying for the fellowship program was, very shortly after Trump's Muslim bans, very contemporaneous to ICE arrests in courthouses in Brooklyn, very close to the office that I would actually be working in and be placed in. And I knew that I wanted to be learning from the very best that I could, so that I could then take what I had learned and go and take that elsewhere to where there wasn't access to counsel. And so in joining IJC initially, I was on a mission to just be a sponge, learn from everybody I could, everything I could from my host organization. And then as my time was wrapping up in my fellowship, I applied to IJC and I said, hey, can we work something out to do a third year at William & Mary Law School? I can't take credit as the founder and director of the Immigration Clinic. Professor Stacy Kern-Shear had founded the clinic during what was my second year as an IJC fellow. And so it had just started out. They were hitting the ground running down here and, really trying to increase access to counsel. And so the pitch to IJC was, we're all about increasing access to counsel. Why don't I take, just like I said with my mission, why don't I take what I've learned here from all this incredible community, from all this expertise, and bring it to an area where we're trying to increase access to counsel, make sure people get representation, make sure people get excellent representation, and be teaching the next generation through law students. And so IJC agreed. And so that's what's kept me here. And so I got to do a third and a very unique fourth year as an IJC fellow through my time here at the Immigration Clinic. So very thankful and grateful for that opportunity. And it's all of these things and all this community, the expertise, and the real support from IJC as an organization for all of us here and all the things that we want to pursue that brought me here and has kept me with IJC for so long.
Ali, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here and to be together with everyone. I sort of have to answer this question twice as the double fellow here. I was a community fellow in 2015, went to law school, and then came back as a justice fellow. So I've been around the IJC block twice, and I'm very grateful for that. I think in terms of coming to the community fellowship out of college, in college, my focus was really on refugee resettlement and migration policy in the Middle East. And did have, as Kenji mentioned, sort of a more of a human rights focus. And so when I was beginning to look at post-college jobs, I was looking more in refugee resettlement, thinking about getting into social work, that sort of field, and then came upon IJC and was drawn to, what is still true, that IJC is, I believe, really the only program where people are coming straight out of college and have the opportunity to be legal representatives by becoming accredited as BIA accredited representatives, which is something unique to immigration law. And I found that prospect daunting and also exciting to get that direct experience right away and to know that I would be trained and supported in doing so. And so, just felt like it was too unique of an opportunity to pass up. I'll also say that in sort of transitioning from more international and refugee focused work to domestic immigration work, another big part of that was a college internship I did at IJC, where I ended up working in their program for survivors of torture who were detained in New Jersey ICE detention facilities. And I bring this up because the attorney who brought me there, actually originally as an interpreter for their law student interns, was Alex Gonzalez Peña, who is also part of the IJC family now. And so she really introduced me to what lawyers can do, the way lawyers can get access to these places where people don't have access to detention facilities, and seeing all the difference that made was another push in that direction. So that's what brought me to IJC the first time, and then went to law school specifically to work in deportation defense, finished law school, and came back for the same reason, because I knew this is a place where I could keep doing that work and keep being supported and trained and pushed to provide the absolute best representation possible in a group of amazing people. So here we are.
Thanks, Ali. Thank you for all of you for sharing. I and many others wish there was an IJC when we graduated law school. Unfortunately, there was not. So we ended up pursuing careers in criminal, housing, and family law before we transitioned. So thank you for sharing. All of you finished your fellowship program at IJC. What would you say, or could you share with us some of the most compelling, what you found most fulfilling about your fellowship experience? And any one of you can start.
I can go first. So I was trying to think of, there's so many experiences with clients and with other fellows, but I think one thing that was really fulfilling was a kind of structural thing that having IJC fellows meant for the organization that I was placed at, which was focused on asylum and other forms of sort of protection, in the sense of like refugee protections. But having the two justice fellows, and then we had a community fellow for a time as well, meant that we were able to do additional forms of relief, apply for our clients that the organization didn't have any experience with before we arrived. And so that meant doing work in family court. It meant taking cases to New York appellate court when they didn't work out in family court. And the organization would not have been able to do that without the injection of that staffing of the fellows. And it was so important because this was during the Trump administration, when cases of asylum that we thought were, very solid, were being denied. And so we needed to find and make sure that we applied for every form of relief available for, children in the family who might have separate avenues for relief. So I just wanted to highlight that as one thing that was really satisfying, was knowing that, without this additional fellows present, we wouldn't have been able to, achieve those other forms of relief for our clients. And a lot of them have, although it's taken many years to actually finalize those paths to residency, many of our clients have finally, after 6-7 years, gotten their green cards through that process, as opposed to what we thought was going to be a grant of asylum.
I can chime in here. For me, I think it really was the relationship and community with other colleagues and fellows in the program. I think all of my co-panelists would agree. Immigration defense is really, really hard. The victories and hard-won wins are incredible and so meaningful, but also the work can be really traumatizing and painful too. And so community is just so important to sustain you and to help you not feel alone. And IJC really helped in that aspect, particularly because I was placed in a relatively small unit at my host. And to this day, I remain close with fellows, both who were in my year and also after. And my supervisor actually was in my same class as a justice fellow. And, now immigration law is so complicated that there's, subspecialties, and there are alumni who are subspecializing in specific things. And I can turn to those folks when I have questions about those matters. And it's really wonderful to have those connections through this network.
Yeah, kind of building off of what's already been said, I think, as I was thinking about kind of what's been most fulfilling about this, I think when you think about a fellowship program, you think about it being, a 2-year time frame. It's very easy to think, oh my God, that's so fast. Like, what are we going to be able to do in that time, especially when, as Kenji's saying, a lot of these cases can take many, many years. But IJC fellows, we really go into our cases, and I think I can speak for many of us by saying this, going into cases with the mentality of people deserve representation, even if it's not the strongest case on the planet, even if it's not like one that everybody around me is going to say, oh, you're definitely going to win that one. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance. And so what's been extremely fulfilling for me, especially as I stay in touch with my host organization and everything like that, is to learn that the cases that I started, or the cases that were started before me, that I then got to work on, that have continued on, have been granted. And some of them being granted that we weren't sure we were going to take. But I remember sitting at meetings saying, y'all, I think we've got to try this. I think there's something here. Let's see where we can go with this. And so being able to build that legacy, both in terms of our cases and supporting one another, but also, leaving behind, something for each class of fellows behind us, whatever that might be, whether it's samples, advice, support, anything like that. I think just that building upon, whether it's cases or other things that we do year after year, has been really, really special.
Yeah, I would echo all of that, and just that I think for me as a community fellow in the early IJC days, something that was incredibly fulfilling was being part of so many innovative initiatives that were just getting off the ground. So I really had the opportunity to do that 3 times as a community fellow. I came in to the Arab American Association, where we hadn't had fellows before, and we were really setting up a program from scratch. And so everything that involved, but it was exciting to be part of that and to have IJC's support there and to see the difference it made. We started there, I think it was like the 3rd day of training when Yemeni TPS was announced, and the Arab American Association's clients that they serve are very high percentage from Yemen and were qualified for TPS. And so we hit the ground running there and were able to do hundreds of TPS applications in the first year. And if we hadn't been there, folks might not have had representation on those, and it makes such a huge difference. So being part of that, and then I was down at Carnes, one of the family detention centers, for several months as a community fellow, and again, sort of doing work that if IJC hadn't been doing, no one would have been doing. We were paired with Raices there, which does amazing work, but we only often had 1 or 2 attorneys on the ground for a detention center that's 600 women and children looking for representation. And then being able to come back from there, and IJC saw this other need that when families were getting out of those detention centers and moving on to New York or whatever city they, had been planning to live in before being incarcerated by ICE, there's that ongoing need for representation. There was a gap there. So we were able to start IJC's Adults with Children project, which was focused on asylum-seeking families coming up from the border so that they could continue having high-quality representation. So I think, having the trust from IJC to help set up those projects and having IJC's vision about what exactly is needed, and then seeing that play out in such a concrete way, that was so fulfilling to me. And I've seen IJC replicate that over and over the last 9 years in so many new sites. So,
Ali, thank you so much. Yes, we are also fulfilled when we hear stories like this from you on how we've worked with you and you've worked with the organizations to build capacity at those organizations, to build network amongst the community, because it's all about a shared responsibility from all of us in trying to build representation. So it's noteworthy that all of you are still working in the immigration field, in direct services, policy, appellate practice, and academia. How did your fellowship experience inform the work you do today? Nicole, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to start. I was kind of talking about this earlier, but truly, I mean, my time as a fellow didn't just inform it, but crafted all of it. You know, I'm forever grateful to IJC for, you know, accepting me from the beginning as a fellow. And then, as Ali just said, you know, that trust to set up these new projects. You know, where we are in Hampton Roads in Virginia is a very underserved region. And so the trust to be able to say, okay, you know, here's this pitch from, you know, a second-year fellow, here's what taking what you've learned at Safe Horizon and, you know, working with a professor here at William & Mary and saying, okay, how can we make that happen? And being able to support and, you know, turn the clinic into what it is today with just the incredibly increased capacity, the way that we've been able to train so many other students who many are going into the immigration field, but many of our fellows or many of our students then, you know, are applying to fellowship programs, but they're also, you know, doing these cases pro bono. And all of the things that, you know, our students are doing at the clinic is because of what IJC did to begin with to get us started. And I'm really, really grateful for that trust in what we as fellows do, so that we can get to where we are. I think that's really, really remarkable and really speaks highly of IJC in terms of who they're recruiting to be fellows and their trust in us to become the experts that we are today.
Ali, Kenji?
Well, I would say after 2 years working in the immigration field, you see so many problems that they could fill 100 lifetimes of policy and advocacy work. I'm sure everyone on the call who's ever had to deal with immigration in their personal life or as a professional matter knows how messed up, to use the, you know, the clinical term here, the immigration system is. And I wanted to give a shout out to some of the attendees I see on the call who are people who I've harassed in the past for examples of problems they've had in their clients' cases. And that's, you know, something that I have been able to make use of or abuse is that fellows, you know, list alumni email list, just check in with people and see, are you also seeing this? You know, is this a problem you're having? I remember we were working on the transit ban, the third country transit ban during the Trump administration. And I had so many conversations with IJC fellow who was placed in Nevada, which, you know, was a surprise to me. I didn't realize there was somebody in Nevada and who was able to, you know, speak to a number of clients who had been barred from relief because of that rule. And so that was just really valuable. But yeah, just generally, I would say in the policy work that we are trying to do and trying to expand services to have more legal services for newly arrived people as opposed to resettled refugees at the organization I currently work at. We try to take that client-centered approach and to think about the issues we take up because we do have limited resources. We can't work on every single problem that we see. And to think about what are the problems that are greatest and what would have the most impact for the most clients if we were able to make a positive change. So I think that's something that you know runs through IJC's work as well. It's what's animating what IJC's done.
I can jump in. I think that, I mean, what I've taken away from my first round of IJC is my entire career, because it cemented for me that I wanted to become an immigration lawyer and showed me what that looked like. I actually did my law school applications at a coffee shop in San Antonio on Saturday mornings when I was working at Carnes at the end of a long week. And I think more specifically, I think Catherine mentioned like subspecialties, and I think my work as a justice fellow at the Bronx Defenders and also my work in law school with the NYU Clinic really pushed me toward focusing on the intersection of criminal law and immigration law. And in terms of where I am working today, I've like sub specialized perhaps in post-conviction relief for non-citizens who are facing immigration consequences based on prior interactions with the criminal legal system. And having been at the Bronx Defenders, I did work there as a PD advisor for their criminal and family defense practices, as well as doing direct representation through the NIFREP program of folks in removal proceedings. And so that sort of really strong foundation in deportation defense and the, we say crimmigration and the crim intersection is what makes it possible for me today. I only just started last fall, so it's all new, but to take those skills over to sort of a new area for me in doing post-conviction relief and appellate work, but applying an understanding of how immigration law works, and then also just having a clear sense when we're working with clients on their post-conviction piece and they're in deportation proceedings and perhaps have an immigration attorney at the Bronx Defenders, for example. We do a lot of collaboration with the practice there. I have a stronger sense of what they're going through in terms of when they say, I have my master calendar hearing this month, I have this, I have that, I sort of know what it's going to look like and what they're going to need to present. And that can help inform timing, strategy, all sorts of pieces of our post-conviction work. And so I feel grateful to be able to have that perspective and working with clients on this very, very niche piece of their advocacy, and to be able to come at it from that angle to hopefully strengthen their case in immigration court.
For me, so I was placed at the Urban Justice Center's Sex Workers Project for my Justice Fellowship. And the way that this team within UJC was structured was it was very small, but roughly half attorneys and roughly half social workers. And, through IJC, I was able to have that exposure to an interdisciplinary and different framework for approaching advocacy. And having that structure meant that I received trainings and was in meetings led by social workers, and my social worker colleagues just taught me so much during those first 2 years of practicing. They really shaped and informed how I still practice today. They made me see how important it is. The process by which we obtain an outcome is just as important as just the outcome. They helped me ask better and different questions than what law school had prepared me for. They helped me to see that lawyers are not the only or even the most important advocate in the room necessarily. And I feel really fortunate to continue to work at an organization today that, places a lot of value on social workers and structurally, has that in place. And so just wanted to, thank IJC for placing me there and giving me that exposure, because it really did change the lens through which I interact with the folks that we represent and how I approach and think about cases.
Thank you, Catherine. So wanted to find out from all of you, since you are still in the field, working in the field, know that legal representation for immigrants is so critical and makes a dramatic difference in outcomes. What can all of you, or what can all of us do to make access to justice for all immigrants a reality? It's a loaded question, but Nicole, do you want to start?
Yeah, I will say I spent a lot of time thinking about this question, especially as right now in the clinic, we are working as hard as we can to represent as many of our resettled Afghan neighbors as we can. Kind of I'll say silent, certainly from the headlines, humanitarian crisis right now is the access to representation for Afghans, especially considering language barriers, access to counsel based off of where they've been resettled. People aren't choosing where they're resettled based off of where there were attorneys. And so we're doing the best that we can in our region to help as many people as possible. But with humanitarian parole expiring, the anxiety that we see is very, very real among many people. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about how do we get as many people assistance as we possibly can. But for everybody on this call, when it comes down to it, I thought of, the old adage of time, talent, and treasure. And so for all the current fellows and everybody working in this field, time, certainly we are here on this call, but also really putting in the time and the effort to work with as many people as we can. I know everybody here, it's very, very hard, but I want to say to our current fellows, you're doing it. You really are. And we're all so proud of everything that you're doing right now. For talent, I want to give a shout out to some of the people from IJC staff, including Laura Shaw. We talk a lot because she is involved in keeping data, and keeping data is something that I do at the clinic as well, in terms of being able to like show and express just how much we're doing and what does that mean and what does that look like, what are the trends that we can see. It's not just all about, you know, the talent of being able to stand up in immigration court and make an argument. There are lots of other talents that everybody can bring to the table that help all of us in this larger, you know, again, it's a big question, in this larger fight for access to counsel. And treasure. I mean, we can't do this without people who support IJC and our host organizations. And so I'm very grateful for everybody who has given the treasure that they have to support IJC and our host organizations. But it really is going to take all three of those things: our current fellows, our alums, everybody working in this field, but also all of the different talents that people have to support the work that we're doing, and those who have the treasure who can give to help support us and keep all of us doing the work that we're doing. It's such a big question and it's such a big ask, but I feel like that's really the three things when it comes down to it that are going to end up making the difference in the long run. You know, tomorrow we might not be able to take on one more TPS case, but, you know, as we keep going, we will be able to one day. So thank you to all of you.
Kenji, Ali?
Jump in, sure. Yeah, this is a hard question. If we had a quick answer, the world would be a better place. I think a baseline that I was thinking a lot about is awareness. I think even in the legal community, I talk to a lot of people who don't know that folks in removal proceedings do not have guaranteed access to counsel, and people are floored by that, and they should be. And so I think talking to other lawyers, but also talking to communities and making that known so that there is more political will and impetus on local politicians to do something about this, right? New York is a leader in universal representation through NIFA, and that in large part has been because of the support of local politicians seeing the issue, and thanks to Judge Katzman for making it so visible, right? But that's not happening all over the country. And of course, in different parts of the country, local politicians are not interested in increasing access to justice. But if we can at least have a conversation so people know that this is a problem, I think that's a huge starting point. I think another big piece of it is thinking about how, as we bring more people into doing this work and doing representation, also being mindful that access to counsel, universal representation, which is what I see as the goal, is not a band-aid for the larger issues, right? So you can't have a broken immigration system, but give everyone a lawyer, right? Like that's not a solution. And I think fundamentally a lot of these systems that we work in every day shouldn't exist. And so if we can find a way to work within them in a way that's humane, in a way that makes people's lives better, but doesn't capitulate, to the sheer racism and xenophobia that these systems are based on. And I'm speaking of the criminal legal system as well. I think that's really important. So being mindful in these conversations that lawyers are not the answer, as Catherine said, but in the meantime, while these systems exist, we want to bring in as many people as we can and keep fighting. So.
Can sort of build off of that. I think I agree this question is really hard, but I think thinking from my vantage point and having spent a number of years now representing folks who are detained in ICE custody, I think what struck me about the question is like the greatest impediment to access to justice and counsel is detention itself. Detention cuts people off from their loved ones, their communities, their essential medical care, their jobs, and then it cuts people off from counsel and severely hampers their ability to meaningfully participate in their case. And it's fundamentally coercive because they have to give up their liberty in order to pursue all of the defenses and remedies to which they are entitled and which they are eligible for. So I guess all that to say, I think it's critically important for us to think about the tension that Ali just mentioned, and also to be engaged with fights to end ICE detention. And there are many inspiring local fights around this happening, including in New York State, like the Dignity Not Detention Act, which would prohibit New York government entities from entering into contracts with ICE and would get New York State out of the business of immigration detention. So I think engaging in those fights are really important as a essential part of the fight for access to justice, alongside wanting to have more quality representation in the existing system.
Yeah, I really appreciate all those answers. One other thing I would add on the kind of like local level would be, given how difficult the circumstances are at the national level in terms of policy and legal change, thinking about what's happening in your state or in your city, not just in terms of detention, but also on funding for access to counsel or other related issues. So, assistance to newly arrived asylum seekers, or whatever the issue might be. I think it grew in prominence in a lot of areas in the last couple of months and years in terms of arrivals of recent people who've crossed the border. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities there if there are fights happening around those issues. And just to highlight one, it's not really just access to counsel, but this week Utah passed legislation through both houses that expands access to in-state tuition and removes the residency requirement for a variety of categories of immigrants to make it easier for people who are newly arrived to access in-state tuition and to go to college in Utah. And that's obviously not a very progressive legislature. So these things are possible all over the country. They may look different in different places. And then the last thing I just wanted to add was, the access to counsel issues are also a question of how we take care of ourselves as attorneys. And that I think we've all seen in the years that we've practiced, the burnout that happens and how hard it is for people to stay in this work in the long term. And so I think that's something that we all have to think about in terms of how we interact with one another, and when we become supervisors ourselves, or are running programs, and just as we develop our own practices, thinking about how to make them sustainable, because it's a real struggle to find enough attorneys, and we don't want to burn out the few that we have. And so I think that's also should be part of our conversation, is thinking about how not just to build up the fellows as attorneys, but also how to keep us all here practicing as long as we can.
Kenji, thank you. And I could agree with all of you. I definitely agree with all of you, because we all recognize how immigration is an integral part of our American experiment, bringing different people together and different cultures, and the importance of justice for everyone who comes here. So I could not agree with you more. Chris, do we have any questions for the panelists?
Hi, everyone. We've reached our audience participation segment of the program, so please do submit your questions in the Q&A chat. In the meantime, I have one for our panelists. We have a lot of current fellows in the audience today, and I was wondering, what advice do you have for either current fellows or for prospects who are thinking of applying to either the community fellowship or the justice fellowship?
I'll actually just echo exactly what Kenji was just saying, is, really the self-care and community care element. Like I was saying before, current fellows, we see you. We're so proud of you. But we want y'all and everyone interested in getting into this to stay here. And so finding those ways, whatever it might be, we're actually going to be talking about this in class on Thursday. And so we have this discussion with our students as well. You know, what does self-care and community care look like for you and where you're placed? To give a kind of ridiculous example, mine when I was in New York City was playing Pokemon Go long after that was cool. But it was a way to get out, to be thinking about something else, be walking, exercise, all of that. So whatever it might be, even if it's something that you're like, oh, is it really that? If it's something that can keep you sustained, keep you in this work long term, and recognizing when you may need to take a step back, but also what does it look like to, you know, address what's coming up for you right now. I think that's really important so that everybody can be staying in this, because what may work for one person may not work for you, but it's important to learn from others as well, because you might learn something like I just talked about Pokemon Go, that might be your thing and you didn't realize it. So I hope that whatever that might be, start having those conversations with other fellows, start having those other conversations with people you're in law school with now, if you're a prospective fellow. That's my biggest advice, because we want y'all to stay in this.
Does anyone else want to jump in? No. Well, I would say that I agree with you, Nicole, about the wellness, recognizing that you have to make sure that we are all taking care of ourselves. And we've taken it very seriously at IJC. We've been able to create a wellness committee, and we've been able to put into practice some of the things that would help fellows think about this, including group therapy sessions. We are working diligently to increase some of these supports as well. We know mental health is a huge issue and co-pays are really high. Sometimes you can't even find a therapist who really can deal with your own problem. And so we are working on it diligently and hope that we can increase our offerings. And that is where I would also jump in and say thank you to our supporters who really allowed us to do it, because we've reached out to some of our supporters and asked for help, and they've been able to help us do this. So thank you. Chris?
Thanks all. We do have one question from the audience. This is from Eric Lopez at the CARE Coalition. What advice do you have for fellows who are considering their longer-term career trajectory, specifically how to balance working with federal immigration agencies versus nonprofits versus the private bar?
I mean, maybe it's obvious, but reach out to those of us who are doing the jobs that look interesting to you. I think, most people are, if you don't have their contact information, find them on LinkedIn. But that's what I've always done, is just try to find someone to talk to who has a position or works at an organization that you want to know more about, and just reach out. I think time permitting, we all try to, speak to interested fellows or students, people who want to know more about the organization that we work for, or the work that we do.
Thank you, Kenji. Does anyone else want to jump in?
Judge Burr wanted to say something. Chris, Judge Burr. Judge Burr, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, am I unmuted? I am not a panelist, but I would like to put in a plug for considering places to work that you don't perceive as being naturally friendly or up your alley. And what I'm speaking about in my own experience was applying to the Department of Justice to become an immigration judge. There, I had worked at the Legal Aid Society for many years, before I applied to be an immigration judge. I worked in criminal law and immigration law the last 4 years. And there were a number of my colleagues who really thought that it was a capitulation to apply to become an immigration judge, that I was really almost, like I was applying to become a prosecutor or whatever. It's my firm belief that you can have influence from the inside, and that there's never going to be a way to change. Let's take the immigration court as an example. To change that court, unless you bring in people who are coming from my background or your background. I have the very strong feeling that people should not prejudge what opportunities a job in the government offers, and what that job filled by the right person can do to advance the cause of justice.
Thank you, Judge Burr. We are almost at time. We have one last question from the audience. This is from Henry Zhu. Is there something you wish you knew about practicing immigration law or the IJC fellowship when you were a law student or when you were applying? So something you wish you knew then that you know now.
I'll give a super quick answer. Immigration attorneys are really supportive of one another. I think in law school, we're very used to kind of being competitive with one another, especially when you're graded on a curve. But this is true both of IJC and IJC fellows and the bar as a whole. As Kenji was talking about, reaching out to people, giving advice, but also, on the listserv all the time, we're throwing around questions, asking each other, hey, have you experienced this? Have you seen this? How do I get in touch with this judge's clerk? I mean, whatever it might be, questions big and small, the support that this bar has is really, really outstanding. And I think as we talk about the challenges and in some ways how overwhelming this work can be, it's really, really heartening to know that there are lots of other people in this with you. So I've been really grateful to see that both in my time, like with IJC and in terms of the fellowship, but also the bar as a whole.
This is maybe a darker turn on Nicole's very positive answer, but I think that something that's become increasingly clear to me over years of doing this work, and I think it's just something for us all to be mindful of as immigration advocates, is how much of our immigration system, and I've expressed that this is a system I don't think should exist in the form that it does, how much of it is built on forcing folks in removal proceedings or doing affirmative applications to relive trauma or to display trauma in a certain way to an adjudicator. And that's deeply problematic. That is how our law is structured. And I think being cognizant of it going in is important for, understanding the toll the work will have on yourself, but more importantly, how you approach this work with clients. And I think I've just become increasingly candid from the get-go working with new clients about what these flaws are, what this system is asking for sometimes, and the ways in which that is going to be deeply harmful to them, like separate from the possible end result of a deportation order. I think being honest about that and thinking about how we can reduce harm in our work, I see us as doing harm mitigation work, is really important, and just something to know when you're considering whether to become an immigration lawyer. That's a huge part of what we do.
Ali, thank you. Thank you so much. So Catherine, Kenji, Nicole, and Ali, thank you so much for sharing your journeys with us. We appreciate all that you do every day, and we wish you the best in future endeavors. To our staff at IJC who worked on this concept and helped put all of this together, there were so many invincible hands that helped us do this. I say thank you. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing all of you in person next year when we celebrate our 10th anniversary. Thank you so much and have a good afternoon.